My name is Camilla. I am 62 years old, and 2 weeks ago, I paid for a wedding that I wasn't invited to, at least. Not really. Not in the way a mother should be. The sun was just beginning to set when I arrived at the venue, a restored vineyard estate north of Seattle. I had chosen it myself, booked it 14 months in advance. I remember the moment my son Brad and his fiancée, Melissa, saw it for the first time. Her eyes went wide, and she said it looked like a Pinterest board come to life. I had smiled. That had been enough. My dress was pale plum, long-sleeved with delicate beading that shimmered just slightly under soft light. I had it custom tailored to hide the soft skin under my arms. I wanted to feel appropriate, not glamorous, not matronly, just enough to look like the mother of the groom, which I was. Or so I thought. The valet didn't recognize me at first. That should have been my first clue. Name, he asked, holding a clipboard. Camilla Reyes. I'm the groom's mother, I answered, smiling politely. His eyes flicked to the list, then back at me. Right. Yes, of course. You can check in with the planner inside. He didn't offer to escort me. Inside, the reception was already alive with music and champagne chatter. Strings of Edison bulbs hung from the high beams like pearls. Every table had arrangements of wild peonies and white lilacs, Melissa's favorite. I paid for those too. I had paid for all of it. The planner, a young woman in an earpiece named Dana, spotted me from across the foyer and waved me over. Oh, Mrs. Reyes. Great. Follow me, please. Where am I sitting? I asked. Brad didn't tell me. Dana didn't answer immediately. She just started walking briskly past the main room, past the beautifully laid banquet tables, the ones with gold-rimmed chargers and place cards written in rose gold calligraphy. We reached a side hallway that led into a large kitchen space filled with staff clinking trays and plating hors d'oeuvres. Then she pointed. Right here. We figured it would be quieter for you. My seat was a gray metal folding chair tucked against the tiled wall, next to a cart full of stacked dirty glasses. The smell of cooked meat and bleach was sharp. I blinked, thought maybe she'd made a mistake. But she was already walking away. There's water and bread on the counter, she called over her shoulder. I stood there. My hands trembled slightly. I hadn't eaten all day. My heels pinched. I could hear the laughter and music from the next room. I leaned forward to peek through the swinging door into the reception. I saw Melissa laughing, her dress, sleek and modern, barely brushed the ground as she spun. Brad stood next to her, grinning, a flute of champagne in his hand. A tall man raised a toast. Everyone clapped. No one was missing me. No one even looked toward the kitchen. And that's when it hit me. There was no mistake. I wasn't included. Not really. I was the wallet. The planner. The invisible. They had written me out of the program entirely. No speech. No dance with the groom. No seat with the family. Just a chair in the kitchen. I sat down on it, because I didn't know what else to do. For 27 minutes, I stared at a wall while busboys moved around me. One of them offered me a cube of cheese from a tray. He thought I was a lost guest who'd wandered into the wrong area. I nodded politely, took it, and thanked him. I had raised Brad alone. His father left when he was 6. I worked 2 jobs and still managed to pack his lunch every morning, attend every parent-teacher conference, stay up late helping him write essays about To Kill a Mockingbird. I didn't date. I didn't travel. I didn't complain. I just did what mothers are supposed to do. But today, none of it mattered. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through the texts from Brad that now felt different. Mom, thank you for covering the florist. Melissa was so stressed. You're the best. You're a lifesaver for handling the venue deposit. Can we put the DJ under your name for billing? Just easier that way. The DJ, the flowers, the open bar, the gifts for the wedding party, the rehearsal dinner, the tuxedo fittings. All of it. All of it was mine. And no one had even greeted me when I arrived. My sister Anna had flown in from Albuquerque. I had invited her. I didn't see her inside, though. Maybe she was seated at a table. A real one. Just then, a burst of laughter came through the doors, louder this time, as if the toasts were heating up. I rose slowly, my knees aching slightly, and walked quietly to the edge of the swinging door. Just enough to see. I spotted the seating chart on an easel next to the reception entrance. Guests hovered around it. Curious, I stepped over. There were tables named after cities: Venice, Kyoto, Cape Town, Rio. I scanned the names. Melissa's parents were at Paris, Brad's college friends at Sydney, Melissa's coworkers at London. I wasn't listed. Not once. Not on any table. I wasn't even a thought. No one had remembered to place me. I could have cried, but I didn't. Instead, I turned around, walked back through the kitchen, and into the small room I had seen labeled Event Office. I sat down in front of a computer, logged into the online portal where I had managed every wedding detail, and began quietly canceling what I could. The band was scheduled to arrive in 45 minutes. I canceled them. The bar upgrade gone. The late-night dessert truck Melissa had insisted on refunded. The honeymoon package I had arranged through a friend at a travel agency paused. No reason to gift something that came with a thank you text. The wedding party gifts I had ordered to be delivered tonight: monogrammed robes, engraved watches, hand-stitched keepsakes, intercepted. They would never arrive. And then I opened a blank tab and began searching for apartments in Spain. I had always wanted to go. I had always said, maybe next year. Maybe it's time. I smiled. Not with joy, not with peace, but with the strange satisfaction of a woman finally, and completely, awake. By the time I reached the hotel, the vineyard's parking lot had emptied into a sea of brake lights and exhaust. The wedding was still going, no doubt, but without me. I didn't look back. Not once. I drove with both hands tightly gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles pale, my face calm. Too calm. I had moved past humiliation. I had moved into something colder, sharper, and more precise. The hotel lobby was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the late-night jazz piped through the speakers. I nodded to the concierge, who offered me a sympathetic look, like he'd seen too many mothers come and go in heels that pinched and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Room 504. A suite I had booked weeks ago. Melissa had suggested I find somewhere simple to stay. I'd chosen this place out of habit, elegant, quiet, just like I used to be. Once inside, I slipped off my shoes, kicked them neatly to the side, and hung my wrap on the coat hook by the door. My dress still shimmered under the soft light of the room's lamps. I didn't change out of it. I wasn't ready to let it go yet. I set my purse on the bed and noticed the blinking light on my phone. When I picked it up, the screen lit up in a frantic parade of missed calls. 37. The first was from Brad. Then another. Then Melissa. Her mother. Brad again. Dana, the planner. Voicemails stacked one after the other. I didn't play a single one. I didn't need to. I could already hear the tone. Confused. Then annoyed. Then maybe desperate. Mom, where are you? Camilla, the band says they're not coming. What is going on? Can you call me back right away? It's urgent. I turned the volume off and dropped the phone face down on the comforter. They had made their choice. They had made me invisible in a room filled with people. Now, they could feel what that was like. I sat down at the desk in the corner of the suite, the one with a notepad, a small reading lamp, and a complimentary pen that barely worked. I didn't care. I pulled out my laptop, opened the spreadsheet labeled Brad plus Melissa wedding master budget, and began scrolling. Every invoice, every confirmation, every payment trail was there. I had built this event like a second job for nearly 18 months. I started from the top. Venue deposit, paid by me. Planner fee, me. Band, 2 payments scheduled, one already paid and another due after their second set. Flowers half paid, half due upon delivery. Bar service, full payment due post-event. But something caught my eye. A line that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. Bride's bachelorette surprise, Club Lux VIP, $2,300. I blinked, clicked. It was charged to my card. Another line appeared further down. Private limo service, 6 hours, $1,400. And another. Personal glam squad, 3 attendants, $1,000. None of this had been authorized. Melissa had asked me to handle the final details of the wedding budget last month, and I had agreed because I didn't want to appear difficult. She must have assumed I wouldn't look too closely. She was wrong. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt something entirely different rise in me, a sensation I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Control. Real, tangible control. I opened my email. To Montalvo Floral Designs subject, contract breach, service adjustment, dear Patricia, due to the failure of the event organizer to provide a seat or recognition to the primary financial sponsor of the wedding. I am requesting that payment for the remaining balance of the floral arrangements be halted. The terms of our agreement specified full participation of all key family members, which did not occur. Please consider this email my formal notice of breach of conditions. Camilla Reyes to Oralite Entertainment subject, performance cancellation, immediate, dear Gavin. Please consider the second half of your band's performance at the Brad Reyes/Melissa Torres wedding to be canceled due to a substantial deviation in the event's execution. You will be paid for services rendered, but the remainder of your fee, originally scheduled for release at midnight, will not be processed. Thank you for your understanding. Camilla Reyes to High Bar Events subject, post-event payment hold, dear Natasha. As of this message, I am placing a full hold on the open bar payment scheduled for tomorrow. There has been a failure in logistical execution and guest recognition at tonight's event, and I will be reviewing the itemized bill before authorizing any further charges. Please do not process until further notice. Camilla Reyes, each click of send gave me another inch of myself back. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was reclamation. For years, I had said yes. Said, don't worry about it. Said, I just want you to be happy. I had handed over my savings, my time, my silence. For what? A folding chair in the kitchen. I glanced again at the phone. Still silent. Still blinking. Probably more messages piling up. Probably Brad finally realizing I hadn't been in the room for the toasts, the cake, the mother-son dance. Or maybe he hadn't noticed at all. I leaned back in the chair, my back aching slightly from the hours I'd spent sitting rigid and tense at the venue. I loosened the pins in my hair. My reflection in the dark hotel window stared back at me, older, yes, but not as small as I had felt earlier. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's forgotten mother. I felt like someone with options. I opened a blank document and began typing something else, a letter to myself. Not a journal entry, not event. A promise. This will not happen again. You will never again beg to be seen by people who benefit from your silence. You are not a wallet. You are not background noise. You are not disposable. You are the foundation they all stand on. Let them feel what it's like when that foundation disappears. When I closed the laptop, it was after midnight. The vineyard would be quiet by now. The decorations coming down. The last champagne flutes being rinsed. They would notice, eventually, that the bills weren't paid. They would notice that I had disappeared. And tomorrow, they would start calling again. But tonight, I slept like a woman who had just remembered her own worth. I didn't sleep as well as I'd hoped. I woke at 4:11 a.m., alone in the hotel bed, my body stiff, my mind too loud to rest. The air in the room was stale and still. I sat up slowly, the fabric of my dress wrinkled beneath me, the beating leaving faint indentations on my arms. I hadn't changed out of it. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to feel every weight, every thread, every reminder of what they'd done to me. I got out of bed and padded barefoot across the carpet to the minibar. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window, looking out over the dark city. No traffic yet. Just glowing streetlights and the occasional late-night pedestrian. I used to believe that mornings like this, quiet, still, lonely, were just part of aging. That emptiness was something you got used to. But now I saw it for what it was, the product of years of quiet disappearances. Not sudden, gradual, polite, expected. I don't know exactly when it started, but I remember the first time I swallowed my voice for someone else. Brad was 12. His father, Daniel, had forgotten to pick him up from a school trip. I rushed from work, still wearing my cashier apron, late, frantic, apologizing for something I didn't do. Brad had been crying, humiliated, and Daniel? He arrived 20 minutes later with fast food and an empty excuse. I should have said something, but I didn't. I let him laugh it off. I didn't want to cause tension. That was the beginning. Since then, my life had been a series of gentle disappearances. I let myself shrink at PTA meetings so Brad's stepmother could take the spotlight. I downplayed my opinions during college visits so Brad could bond with his father over career talk. I stopped calling twice a week when Melissa said she liked her space. I let holidays shift toward alternating years and then no invitations at all. Always accommodating. Always background. Even during the wedding planning, I deferred. Melissa wanted neutral tones, so I changed the floral palette. Brad said he didn't want a big speech, so I withdrew mine. They forgot to include my name in the program, and I laughed it off. I told myself the day wasn't about me. But that folding chair in the kitchen? That was deliberate. That was the end. I kept seeing it. The tray of half-wilted garnishes. The smell of onions. The scraping of cutlery and plates. The folding chair wobbling under my weight as I sat, hands in my lap, watching the crumbs fall off trays. No one came to check on me. No one noticed I wasn't at the table. And when I peered through that narrow crack in the kitchen door, just enough to see into the reception, I saw exactly what I needed to. Melissa's mother giving a speech, holding the microphone like she was the one who'd paid for the night. And we are so grateful to everyone who helped make this day possible, she gushed. This celebration is not just a wedding, it's the beginning of a legacy. A future. She didn't glance at the kitchen door. She didn't say my name, but I heard the way she looked at Melissa while speaking, as if they were collaborators. And in that moment, I knew. This was an oversight. This was strategy. They had written me out, deliberately. Erased the woman who funded it, who sacrificed for it, who loved through all of it. And they hadn't even done it cruelly. No, that would have been something to confront. Something to resist. They did it casually, with the calm assurance of people who believed I would never fight back. That was what stung most. Not the betrayal, not the silence, but the expectation that I would accept it, smile through it, continue funding it. A new sensation bloomed in my chest, not sorrow, not grief. Anger. Thick, hot, old anger. The kind that doesn't just boil. It simmers, builds, remembers. I stood and walked to the desk, turned the hotel light on. My hands were steady now. They thought I was invisible? Let them try to unsee me now. I pulled up the wedding contact list. All of it. The caterer, the coordinator, the gift registry, the hotel block manager, the honeymoon planner. I opened my financial accounts. I reviewed every automatic payment, every scheduled transfer. They would feel every inch of my absence. Melissa's wedding dress, one of a kind, Italian silk, custom fitted by a boutique in Los Angeles. She'd begged me to help her pay for it, said she'd pay me back. I had put it on my own credit card. It hadn't cleared yet. Click. Cancelled. The honeymoon suite in Maui, booked under my name, held on my business card for simplicity, Melissa had said. Click. Cancelled. The customized champagne bottles. The brunch for out-of-town guests. The thank you gift bags. All under my account. Cancelled. 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 I began writing a list. Not of revenge. No, this was something more calculated than that. This was reclamation. Phase 1. Disengage. Cut all remaining financial ties to the wedding. Freeze the credit card attached to Melissa's wedding registry. Contact the travel agency about honeymoon refund. Notify the venue of misrepresentation and request partial reimbursement. Phase 2. Remove gratitude from the narrative. Request public correction of omission from printed programs. Withdraw my offer for future family contributions. Phase 3. Watch and wait. Observe who contacts me for apology. Record what is said and what is not. Prepare for the conversation that will come. The one where Brad will ask what happened. Where he'll expect forgiveness. But I would not give him what he expected. Not anymore. At 6:07 a.m., the sun finally began to rise, casting a pale pink glow over the city's skyline. I sat back in my chair and looked at my reflection in the darkened glass. Same face, same eyes, but not the same woman. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be invited. I was planning my entrance. And when I returned, it would not be quietly. It's a strange thing, the way peace feels when it comes after fury. That evening, I made the rest of the calls. One by one, I contacted each vendor, each supplier, each smiling professional who had seen me as a harmless woman with an open checkbook. No more. I was clear, polite, but firm. The honeymoon reservation was canceled. The boutique hotel had no issue reversing the charge once they heard that the guest hadn't even paid for the stay herself. The custom wedding favors, already boxed and en route, were intercepted at the warehouse. The luxury transport for the couple's grand exit, the vintage Rolls-Royce Melissa had insisted on for the Instagram photo, was informed that their services would not be needed and that the deposit would not be returned unless the final payment was waived. And the registry? That was the easiest. I called the department store directly and told them to remove my card from the account. Any pending items that had not shipped were marked payment failed. Each call ended the same way: a sip of tea, a quiet exhale, and an eerie, beautiful stillness. I didn't cry once. I didn't hesitate. I wasn't doing it to hurt them. I was doing it to remember myself. Every cancellation, every refusal, every declined payment was a way of saying I am here. I exist. You don't get to pretend I don't. When the last call was finished and my laptop lid clicked shut, I looked around the quiet hotel room. For the first time in years, I wasn't anxious. I didn't feel small or ashamed or worried that I'd gone too far. I felt free. I turned off the lights, pulled the covers up to my chest, and fell asleep within minutes. No racing thoughts. No replaying conversations. No imaginary apologies from people who would never give them. Just silence. Just rest. I woke to a buzz of messages. The phone, which I had left charging on the windowsill, lit up like a firework display. Brad, Mom, what's going on? The bar says they didn't get paid. Melissa, Camilla, this is really uncalled for. I am trying to be respectful, but this is petty. Brad, the hotel says our suite is canceled. Are you serious? Melissa, we are married. This is supposed to be the happiest time of our lives. Brad, call me back. Melissa, if you don't fix this, I swear to God, you're dead to me. I scrolled through them over a quiet hotel breakfast of oatmeal and black coffee. I chewed slowly. I added a pinch of salt. I savored the moment the way Melissa had probably intended to savor her complimentary champagne welcome basket, the one that never arrived. They would survive this. In fact, I hoped they would. What I wanted wasn't revenge, not in the way they imagined. I wanted them to understand. And I wanted to never forget that I could choose to disappear or not. After I'd eaten, I showered and dressed, folding the plum wedding dress and gently placing it in the hotel's dry cleaning bag. I wouldn't throw it out. That wasn't the point. That dress had witnessed the final scene of a life I had outgrown. While packing, I opened the small zipped compartment of my suitcase. I kept important papers there: passport, insurance cards, and an old letter I hadn't looked at in years. I almost didn't notice it. It had slipped under the lining. The envelope was yellowed now, fragile along the edges. The handwriting was unmistakable, steady, narrow, written in blue fountain ink. To Camilla. Only if I'm gone. Daniel. My husband. The man who had disappeared from our lives without much ceremony. He hadn't died. He'd left. Quietly. Said he'd send money. Didn't. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 decades. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the letter with hands that were suddenly trembling. My Camilla, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer in your life, and I didn't get the chance to explain something I should have told you long ago. I didn't tell you because I was afraid. Not of your reaction, but of what it might do to you. To us. Brad isn't yours. At least, not by blood. You know that after your second miscarriage, I went to stay with my sister in Chicago for a few weeks. What I didn't tell you is that, while I was there, I got a call from a woman I knew in college. Her name was Sarah. We had been briefly involved before you and I met. She had a child, a 6-year-old boy. She was sick, and she asked me to take him. I didn't want to tell you. You had just gone through hell. And when I saw Brad, when you saw him and how quickly he clung to you, how you held him like he was always meant to be in your arms, I convinced myself that maybe it didn't matter. That love could erase blood. And you did love him. You raised him. You gave him everything. But I couldn't leave this world without telling you the truth. You deserve to know it. You are not Brad's mother by biology. You are his mother by every other definition that matters. I'm sorry. I should have told you when he was old enough to understand. But I didn't have your courage. I hope you forgive me one day. Daniel, I read the letter once. Twice. Then I sat still for a long time. It made sense now. Not just his distance. Not just the strange gaps in early paperwork. But Brad's coolness. The indifference. The way he had drifted. He wasn't mine. Not by blood. But I had loved him as if he were carved from my bones. I had stitched him into every part of my life. And he had chosen Melissa. Chosen to erase me. It should have shattered me. But instead, I felt something even more final than heartbreak. I felt release. I stood, folded the letter carefully, and placed it back in the envelope. They could keep their marriage, their gifts, their filtered photos, and performative apologies. I had something better, the truth, and a future with no more pretending. The letter didn't break me. It didn't bring on the kind of weeping that television dramas expect of women who discover their lives were built on hidden foundations. No shaking hands. No slow slide down the wall. No whispered why. Instead, there was a stillness. A sharp and immediate stillness, like stepping into a room you thought was empty and finding only yourself there, illuminated under a beam of cold sunlight. I sat for a long while with Daniel's letter in my lap. You are not Brad's mother by biology. You are his mother by every other definition that matters. Those words, meant to soothe, were not enough to wound me, nor to comfort. They simply hovered there, between the person I was before I read them and the person I was becoming, breath by breath. I had raised someone else's child. Without knowing it, I had held him through fevers, sat in plastic chairs during every parent-teacher meeting, taught him how to tie his tie for his first school dance, paid for braces, college, first apartments, utilities when he lost jobs, gifts when Melissa wanted something, dinners I could barely afford after retirement. And all the while, I thought, he's my son. Because I made him my son. I gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left of the girl I used to be. And then I gave some more. For the first time, I understood why Daniel had left. It wasn't shame, not really. It was cowardice. He had handed me a truth too big to hold, and he hadn't stayed to see if I could carry it. But I had. I always had. In the inside flap of the envelope, I noticed something else. Folded so tightly it had tucked into the seam. Another letter. Smaller. Shorter. Written on the same paper. I opened it slowly, heart steady now. Camilla, I don't know if I'm brave enough to leave this second note, but if I am, then it means I couldn't walk away without giving you the whole truth. Brad's mother, Sarah, she didn't die. She left. She left him at a bus station, and I got a call from a shelter the next day. I didn't know what else to do, so I went. I found him sitting on a bench with a paper bag of clothes and no shoes. And when I walked up to him, he looked at me with eyes I couldn't forget. He didn't ask questions. He just asked if he could go home. I didn't know where home was supposed to be. But when I brought him back and you opened the door and you dropped the mug you were holding and ran barefoot across the driveway to kneel in front of him, I realized something. Home was you. I didn't deserve you. But I knew you could do what she couldn't. Please don't let this undo everything. Please know I did what I thought was right in the only way I knew how. He was abandoned, Camilla. But you never abandoned anyone. This time, something did crack. But not in my chest. In the story I had clung to for decades. The myth that mothers are only real if they give birth. The lie that blood ties outweigh decades of devotion. The illusion that I had failed somehow, that I had been taken advantage of, that I had been weak. I wasn't weak. I had been chosen. Not by Brad. Not even by Daniel. But by the life itself. By that moment in the driveway, when a 6-year-old boy with no shoes looked at me and waited for me to decide if he was mine. And I had said yes. That meant something. That meant everything. I stood up, walked to the window of my hotel suite, and pulled the curtains wide open. The city was bustling now, morning light touching the high rises, people walking with coffees, cars inching through intersections. I saw couples, business people, strangers. I didn't envy any of them. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened by the question, where do I fit in? I didn't have a seat at their table anymore. Not at Melissa's curated wedding, not at Brad's side, not in the background of any more family photographs where I was made to look like a benefactor or a burden. And that was fine, because the table I'd once been desperate to be invited to, it didn't deserve me. Let them sit without me. Let them celebrate a marriage funded by a woman they refused to acknowledge. Let them sip champagne and take selfies and pretend kindness when they needed it. I wasn't coming back. I closed the letter, folded it once, and placed it back inside the envelope. Then I picked up my phone. Another message had come through while I was reading. Brad, Mom, we're meeting at Melissa's parents' house. I think we all need to talk. I hope you'll come. For closure. I stared at it, then typed 2 words. No, closure found. Then I turned the phone off. Not silent, not airplane mode. Off, I packed slowly, methodically. As I zipped my suitcase shut, a feeling took root in me that I hadn't felt in years. Possibility a life without obligation. A chapter that started with my name, not someone else's. The airport was less than an hour away. I opened my laptop and began searching flights. Lisbon, Buenos Aires, Reykjavik. Maybe I'd take a few months. Rent a small place. Walk unfamiliar streets. Speak only when I wanted to. Spend money on myself. Not for guilt. Not for gratitude. Just because I could. Let Brad and Melissa wonder where I went. Let them tell their version of the story. I wouldn't correct them. Because I was done speaking to people who refused to hear me, the house felt smaller than I remembered. It had only been a few days since the wedding, but when I stepped through the front door again, suitcase in hand, the air felt different. Staler. Still, somehow, even though I'd left every window cracked open. I set my keys on the table and stood in the entryway, just looking. I had vacuumed before I left, wiped the counters, fluffed the couch cushions. Not because anyone was coming over, but because I'd been raised to believe that leaving a messy house, even for a few days, was a kind of failure. A silent judgment passed against yourself. So I had tidied, like I always did, like I had for 40 years. But now I wasn't sure who I had done it for. The walls of the hallway held my answer. Photos. So many photos. Brad at age 6, standing in his Halloween costume, a homemade firefighter suit I had stitched together from old clothes because we couldn't afford the store-bought version. Brad at 11, holding his spelling bee trophy. Brad at prom. Brad at his college graduation, smiling wide in a cap too big for his head. I'd taken that photo from the 5th row, tears in my eyes, heart so full it could have burst. I looked at the picture longer than I should have, waiting for something, pain, nostalgia, maybe even guilt. But it didn't come. Instead, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not a son. A symbol. A monument to a life I had built around someone else. This house wasn't mine anymore. Not really. It was a museum. A carefully curated space dedicated to my own vanishing. Brad's baby blanket folded in the cedar chest. The framed macaroni art on the laundry room door. The high school essay pinned to the fridge, yellowed and curling at the corners. My life had become a temple to a child who wasn't mine, and who now didn't even bother pretending he wanted me in his life. And still, I dusted the frames every Sunday. Not today. Today, I went to the hallway closet, pulled out an old cardboard box, and began taking down the photos. One by one. The first few made my hands tremble. By the 5th, I felt steady. By the 10th, I felt light. It wasn't destruction. It wasn't revenge. It was just liberation. I wasn't erasing Brad. I was removing the altar I'd built to someone who no longer saw me as anything sacred. The box went into the garage. The walls? Empty now. Quiet. Breathing again. It was nearly 5 p.m. when I stepped into the kitchen, stomach growling. Normally, this was the part of the day where I would ask myself what Brad might want. What Melissa wouldn't find too ethnic or heavy. What wouldn't smell too strong or take too long or feel old-fashioned? And then I'd make that. Always but today, no one was coming. No one was expecting anything. So I opened the fridge, pushed aside the labeled containers of leftover casserole, and pulled out what I wanted: a small pack of fresh salmon, some lemon, a bag of herbs. I pan-seared the fish in butter. A little too much, if I'm being honest. Just the way I like it. I roasted Brussels sprouts until they were dark and crisp. Poured a glass of cold white wine I had been saving for a guest who never came. I set the table for one. No centerpiece. No folded napkins. Just a woman and her plate and the evening sun warming the tile. And I ate. Every bite. I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll through news. I didn't sit at the edge of my chair in anticipation of someone else needing something. I savored it. Slowly. The skin of the salmon was crisp. The lemon bright. The wine just dry enough to bite the back of my tongue. For dessert, I opened a chocolate bar from the back of the pantry, the expensive kind, the one I used to hide from Brad when he lived at home because he'd eat it without thinking. I ate half, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel the need to explain anything to anyone. I left the dishes in the sink. I didn't apologize to the silence. Later that evening, I stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom, washing my face. I looked older than I had last week, but not weaker. There were fine lines at the corners of my mouth from years of forcing smiles. Lines between my eyebrows from concern I hadn't voiced. Silver in my hair that I hadn't had the time or nerve to let grow before now. I met my own gaze in the mirror and said it out loud for the first time. I want a different life. Not more of the same with better manners. Not more scraps of affection doled out when it's convenient. A different life. One where dinner was made for me. One where my walls didn't hold memories that hurt. One where I didn't wait for a phone call that wasn't coming. I dried my hands. I turned off the light. I went to bed not as someone's mother. Not as someone's widow. Not as someone who paid for a wedding and sat in the kitchen, but as a woman with a name, a voice, and finally, her own appetite. It started with a list. Just a short one morning over coffee, real coffee, not decaf, not instant, not whatever Brad used to bring over because it was healthier. I opened my old notepad and, without thinking too hard, began writing names. Not of family, not of obligation. Just people who had shown up for me, however small the gesture. People who saw me. People who listened. By the time I finished, the list had 12 names. Some I hadn't seen in months. Others were right down the street. But each one had earned their place not through blood, but through presence. Eloise, my neighbor across the street who always brought in my trash bins when I forgot. Grace, from the church volunteer group, who never once asked why Brad wasn't at the last few Christmas services. Mrs. Banerjee, my old coworker from the library who had retired before me but still sent me holiday cards, always with a handwritten note. Luis, the young man who rented the unit next door and always offered to carry my groceries, even when I insisted I was fine. Patricia, the florist, who had quietly refunded part of the wedding bill and added a note. You deserved better. 12 names. No titles. No daughter-in-law, no cousin, no former. Just people. Real, kind, living people who had given me something I had stopped expecting, warmth without strings. I decided to host a dinner party. Not a grand affair. Not something curated for Instagram. Just food, laughter, and light. The invitations went out the old-fashioned way, handwritten notes, slipped into mailboxes or sent in envelopes with stamps that didn't match. It said, "You're invited to my table, because you've always made space for me at yours. Saturday, 6 p.m. No gifts, just yourself." The evening arrived with a quiet, golden sky and a slight chill in the air, enough for candles, but not enough to pull out the heavy throws. I wore a long navy tunic and linen pants. No heels. No shapewear. No apology. I had spent the afternoon cooking dishes I loved, spiced lentils from a recipe I'd once learned from a Turkish neighbor, roasted sweet potatoes with rosemary, olive bread from the bakery down the block. No one was going to ask for plain chicken. No one would ask what Melissa could eat. No one would wrinkle their nose at too much garlic. At 5:55, the doorbell rang. Eloise stood there, holding a bottle of red wine and a lemon tart from the bakery. I figured you wouldn't bake dessert. You never liked doing sweets, she said, grinning. I didn't, I smiled, opening the door wider. But I do now. Just the easy ones. By 6:20, the house was filled. Laughter rose from the kitchen and spilled into the living room, bouncing off the now bare walls that once held Brad's photos. No one commented on the absence. No one asked about the wedding. Grace brought wildflowers from her garden. Luis brought a Bluetooth speaker and played music that made everyone sway a little as they passed through the kitchen. There was no head table. There was one long dining table, borrowed chairs from neighbors, mismatched plates. Candles melted slowly in jars I had kept for years, waiting for the right moment. This was it. This was the moment as the wine flowed and second servings were offered without hesitation. Someone raised a glass. It was Mrs. Banerjee, her sari draped elegantly, a twinkle in her eye. I'd like to make a toast, she said, her voice warm and steady. Everyone quieted. To visibility, she said. To being seen. To sitting at tables that don't require permission. To choosing joy. And to Camilla for reminding us all that sometimes we don't need to be invited. We can build our own damn table. Laughter rang out. Glasses clinked. I felt my throat catch. And then they all looked at me. Not the way people look when they want something. The way people look when they are grateful you exist. I raised my own glass, hand steady. Thank you, I said, voice clear. I used to think family was something you were born into. But tonight, I know better. Family is the people who keep your name in their mouths for the right reasons. Who show up, who listen when you whisper, and don't need you to shout just to be heard. I looked around the table. And then I said something that, months ago, I never would have dared. I've spent years paying for seats at tables where I wasn't welcome. This one is mine. And you are all here because you see me. There were smiles, a few tears, a few more toasts. And somewhere between dessert and clearing plates, I realized something strange and wonderful. I had not once thought of Brad, or Melissa, or their silence. I didn't miss them, not even a little, because I was finally sitting at the head table of my life. Not because I bought it, but because I built it. It was a Thursday morning, just 1 week since the wedding, the one I funded, the one I was erased from, and I was in the garden, trimming the rosemary that had finally started growing wild again, when I saw his car pull into the driveway. Brad's car. It used to be my car. I'd given it to him when he started grad school, told him it was just sitting there anyway. It wasn't. I used it every day, but he'd asked and I'd said yes. Of course I did. I wiped my hands on my apron and stood there as he stepped out. He looked different. Not guilty. Not nervous. Just annoyed, the way he always looked when something inconvenienced him. He didn't knock. Just opened the gate and came up the path. Hi, Mom. I said nothing. I thought maybe we could talk, he added, pausing at the porch steps. I figured you'd be back by now. Melissa didn't want me to come, but I needed to hear your side. My side. As if the folding chair in the kitchen hadn't spoken loudly enough. I nodded toward the porch chair. 5 minutes, I said. He sat, tapping his knee like he was running late. I remained standing. So he began. I just want to know what happened. Why you did that. The band, the bar, the gifts, Melissa was humiliated. Was she? I asked quietly. She said guests were whispering all night, he went on. We had to explain things. The photographer left early. We couldn't even do the last dance. I tilted my head. That must have been hard for her. He looked at me like I was speaking another language. Mom, what did you want me to do? It was her day. That's what she wanted. I stared at him, watching closely, waiting for a crack. He didn't say it. No, I'm sorry. No, I didn't know. Just, what did you want me to do? I turned and went into the house. He didn't follow, but I knew he wouldn't leave. Not yet. I returned a moment later with a file folder. Thick. Full. I placed it on the porch table in front of him. What's this? He asked. Receipts, I said. Invoices. Proof of payment. He opened it. The venue deposit. The band. The bar tab. The florist. The custom wedding favors. Even the canceled honeymoon itinerary. All under my name. My credit card. I pointed to the bottom. The photographer, too. Remember? You said you didn't like the cheaper option. Wanted someone with a documentary style. Brad flipped through them, silent now. Then I pulled a smaller envelope from my apron pocket and handed it to him. He opened it. Read the letter. His face paled slightly. Dad wrote this, he said, eyes scanning the paper. I nodded. He looked up at me. So I'm not your. That's not what this is about, I interrupted, voice steady. It's not, he said, like he couldn't believe it. No, I said. It's not about biology. It never has been. I chose you. Every single day for 30 years. I raised you. I fought for you. I made sure you had everything. You may not be mine by blood, but I was your mother in every way that counted. Brad said nothing. But I continued, you sat at your wedding and watched your wife seat me in the kitchen. Like a stranger. Like the caterer's mother. And you didn't say a word. You looked at me once, Brad. Once. And then you looked away. I didn't plan that, he said, defensive now. Melissa, she was in charge of the seating chart. I thought you'd be fine. I laughed. Not a cruel laugh. A tired one. You thought I'd be fine. He leaned forward. I came here to make things right. No, I said. You came here to make things easier. He flinched. I handed him another envelope. Thicker. Worn. What's this? Everything I kept over the years, I said. The lease I co-signed when you couldn't get an apartment after college. The tuition payment receipts. The time I gave up my car so you could drive to interviews. The emergency dental surgery you said your insurance wouldn't cover. The $3,000 for Melissa's first business idea. He was quiet every time you asked. I said yes. Not because I wanted credit, but because that's what mothers do. And now, you don't even see me. You let them pretend I was no one. He opened his mouth to respond. I raised a hand. I don't want excuses, I said. And I don't want a reheated apology that comes too late. Brad's jaw tightened. So that's it? Yes, I said. That's it. He stood, gathering the folders like he didn't know what to do with his hands. His eyes were glassy but dry. I didn't think you'd cut me off like this, he said. After everything. Neither did I replied. But we both surprised each other, didn't we? He hesitated at the porch steps. Is this what you really want? He asked. I took a breath, looked around. The rosemary bush I'd planted after Daniel left. The wind chimes Eloise had brought to my dinner party. The empty hallway, finally free of someone else's memories. Yes, I said. For the first time in my life, it is. I opened the screen door, held it wide. He walked down the path slowly, folder clutched under one arm, like he didn't know what to do with the weight of it. At the gate, he turned. Tell Melissa, I called out before he could speak, that I hope she enjoys the next woman who pays for her party. Then I closed the door. Quietly, finally, and this time, I didn't wonder if he'd come back. The next week was my birthday. I didn't tell anyone in advance. I didn't plan a party, didn't post about it, didn't drop hints or wait for a text from Brad that would never come. For the first time in decades, I didn't spend the week before wondering what kind of celebration I could arrange to make it easier for other people to fit me in. I woke up on the morning of my 63rd birthday with sunlight pouring in through the kitchen window and the smell of fresh basil from the garden drifting in behind it. I didn't feel the need to do anything special, but the house didn't agree. At exactly 11:15 a.m., the doorbell rang. Then again. Then the knocking started. I opened the door to find Eloise, Grace, Luis, and 3 others from the dinner party all standing there with a paper banner that read, "To Camilla, who finally lives for herself, they didn't wait for permission." They marched inside, balancing trays and bags, laughing, hugging me, filling the quiet spaces of my home with the kind of joy I didn't know I'd missed. Eloise brought flowers. Grace brought her infamous deviled eggs, which she insisted were not fancy, just nostalgic. Luis carried a speaker again, this time playing Nina Simone, because Camilla deserves soul, not silence. I didn't cry. I cooked. I opened the windows. I set out plates. I poured wine without asking who wanted what. I made a lemon risotto I'd once reserved only for special occasions. Today was one. Not because it was my birthday, but because I was surrounded by people who chose to be here, without guilt, without history, without obligation. By 2:30, the living room echoed with the kind of laughter that fills corners and lifts ceilings. Eloise told stories about her first job as a nurse. Grace recounted a terrible date that ended with a raccoon in the back seat. Luis admitted he had started baking during the pandemic and accidentally turned it into a side business. There was no edge to the conversation, no performance, no waiting to be interrupted, and no one brought up the wedding. Not because they didn't know, but because they understood it wasn't the center of the story anymore. At some point between dessert and refills, Grace stood up and raised her glass. "I want a toast," she said, eyes bright and voice steady. "Not to birthdays, but to boundaries." Everyone lifted their glasses, to knowing when to stop giving to those who only take. The room stilled for a moment. That kind of beautiful stillness that happens when everyone silently agrees, yes, this is true. Then came the chorus of here, here, and clinking glasses. I stood, not to speak, but just to look. At the people who showed up. At the house, once a museum, now full of warmth again. At myself, no longer a woman waiting to be chosen, but one who had already chosen herself. This was my family now, not the people who shared my blood, but the people who shared the table without needing to be reminded who said it. And in that moment, with wine in one hand and joy in the other, I whispered my own toast under my breath. Never again will I build temples for those who bring stones to throw. Then I smiled, because it wasn't just a toast. It was a vow. The birds woke me before the sun did. Not abruptly, not like an alarm, but gently, like a soft stirring, a reminder that the world was beginning again whether I was ready or not. But this time I was. The sheets were warm for my body. The breeze from the open window moved lazily through the curtains, the scent of soil and lemon blossoms drifting in like a gift. It was early, I could tell by the shade of the sky, that faint blue-gray blur just before the day officially announces itself. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't check the time. I just lay there, quiet, calm, fully awake, and without dread. That, more than anything, was the miracle. For so many years, my mornings had begun with a low thrum of guilt, something forgotten, someone disappointed, a responsibility lingering just out of reach. Had Brad emailed? Had Melissa responded to the gift? Had I done enough? Said enough? Was I being too sensitive or not sensitive enough? It was as if my waking hours had always belonged to someone else. But not today. Today, I swung my legs out of bed, my joints stiff but not unkind. The floor was cool beneath my feet. I wrapped myself in my old, oversized robe, soft at the elbows, fraying at the seams, and padded into the kitchen. The house greeted me like an old friend. The quiet was no longer heavy. It didn't echo with absence or abandonment. It just was. Still. Honest. I ground the coffee beans by hand, slowly, methodically. I'd given up the electric grinder long ago, not out of nostalgia, but because I liked the rhythm of doing it myself. I liked that no one interrupted me. I liked that I didn't have to rush. I liked that I got to choose the pace. When the coffee brewed, I added a cinnamon stick to the pot. It was a habit I used to love, a small indulgence that made mornings feel a bit luxurious, until Brad once offhandedly said it made the house smell too sweet, like some fake bakery. I never used it again after that. But I do now. Every morning. And this morning, it tasted particularly bold, like something returned. I carried the mug out to the porch. It was just past 6. The sun was beginning its slow climb, casting golden streaks through the trees at the edge of my garden. The world was still mostly quiet, save for the birds and the soft rustle of wind through the rosemary bush I'd trimmed yesterday. The garden was overgrown in the best way, wild, tangled, real. The kind of beauty that doesn't ask to be manicured. It reminded me of myself now. I settled into the old wooden chair that Daniel had once sanded smooth when we first moved in, back when we were still playing house, still pretending that marriage was about quiet mornings and shared routines. I used to sit here and wonder what he was thinking. Now, I just wondered how I'd spent so long making myself small for people who never noticed. But even Daniel, for all his shortcomings, had left me something, maybe not in presence, but in truth. His letters had been a key, not a weapon. They hadn't hurt me. They'd unlocked something I hadn't known was trapped inside, the knowledge that I had been carrying more than just Brad. I had been carrying the lie that I was never enough. And now I wasn't carrying anything at all. I looked out at the flower beds. Petunias, snapdragons, lavender. I'd planted them all myself. Over years. Quietly. No one had ever asked why. No one had ever complimented them. But they had bloomed season after season for me. Not for guests. Not for parties. Not for show. Just for me, and I was finally seeing them. I sat back, coffee warming my palms, and let myself breathe in this new life like it was still unfolding. Because it was. Each breath was a page. Each hour was a chapter one hadn't written yet. And for once, I wasn't living inside someone else's story. I was the story, and the story had changed. Later that morning, I opened the hallway closet, the one that used to overflow with wrapping paper and boxes of Brad's childhood art projects and cards I had kept just in case I ever needed proof that I'd mattered once. I pulled down the last of the photo albums. The old ones. The ones I hadn't looked through in years, but couldn't bring myself to discard either. Some pages were sticky with time. Others were fading at the edges. I leafed through them slowly. Brad in the sandbox. Brad blowing out candles. Brad with Daniel, standing in front of our first apartment. I was in some of them too, but often in the background, holding a balloon, wiping something off his chin, laughing just out of frame. Invisible, even in the pictures. I traced one photo with my finger. Brad was 8, holding up a crayon drawing of our house. He had drawn himself, a dog we never had, and a woman with long hair standing next to him, smiling. No father. No furniture. Just her. And him. I used to look at that drawing and think, he sees me. But now I knew better. Children love in the moment. Adults make decisions. And Brad, whatever our history, whatever I gave, had decided. At his wedding, in the silence that followed, in the week of ignored messages and cold explanations, he made his choice. And now, so had I closed the album gently. Then I boxed them all. Not out of anger, not out of grief, but out of space-making. My home deserved to reflect who I was now, not who I had once served. By noon, I was in the kitchen again, making a peach tart. I didn't bake much, but a neighbor had dropped off fresh fruit from the market, and I'd felt like doing something indulgent. For no one else. Just for me. The dough was imperfect. The filling slightly too sweet. But the scent that filled the house? Divine. Honest. Alive. I left it to cool by the window, then stepped back onto the porch with a second cup of coffee and a mind free of anything resembling anxiety. And that's when it hit me it wasn't just that I had left the past behind. It was that the past no longer held me hostage. I didn't need an apology that would never come. I didn't need Brad's understanding or Melissa's acknowledgement. I didn't need to know if they felt regret or guilt or anything at all. What mattered was that I no longer felt chained to the version of myself who needed them to feel it. I had done what needed to be done, not to punish them, but to set myself free. And I was free fully quietly finally. Later that afternoon, as the sunlight began to soften, I brought a slice of tart out onto the porch and sat in my chair again. A young woman walked by with a stroller, smiling as she passed. I nodded, smiled back. I didn't know her name. I didn't need to. This wasn't a story about rebuilding old roles or becoming someone's surrogate. This wasn't about finding replacements for what had been lost. It was about becoming whole without them. I watched the wind ruffle the trees. I watched the lavender sway. And then I said it softly aloud because I needed to hear it from my own mouth. I'm not waiting anymore. Not for closure, not for validation, not for redemption. I had said goodbye. Not in a speech, not with dramatics, but in the way that mattered most. I had stopped giving away pieces of myself to people who only came to collect. And the woman I used to be, the one who said yes because she didn't know how to say no, the one who sat in kitchens with trays and missed dances she paid for, I loved her. I mourned her, but she was gone now. And what was left was something solid. Someone who knew how to open her door to people who saw her and close it firmly on those who didn't. The tart was sweet, the sun warm, The wind kind. And that was enough. That was finally enough. Because I no longer needed him to.